Great, thank you, Vanessa. It is always a pleasure to help out with the CCMF. You guys do a great job, and it's a resource. There's lots of resources for women out there, and it's great to see some resources for men. I do represent both men and women, and sometimes children in family law and child protection matters. And so I just thought I'd make that. Clear at the beginning. I don't know whether I need to make it clear. In any event, that's the way things are. Today, we're going to talk about a very difficult situation and can be very frustrating, and it's particularly high stakes emotionally for the participants because we're going to be talking about how to deal with the holiday travel disputes here. Uh, so, imagine you've planned a family trip to reconnect with relatives abroad, or maybe to give your child a memorable holiday experience. But instead of looking forward to the journey, you are navigating a maze of legal barriers, emotional objections, and logistical hoops simply because you're in the midst of a contentious divorce and breakup. What should be a joyful opportunity has now become a high stakes negotiation. Today, we're going to explore why obtaining travel authorization in these situations can be so complex. We'll look at a range of concerns that often arise, everything from health and safety risks to more emotional factors like jealousy or the fear of losing time with your child. Together, we'll uncover some strategies and legal steps that can help you manage these challenges while always keeping your child's best interests at the forefront. Before diving into the various ways to obtain travel authorization, let's explore the range of parental rights and how they impact travel decisions. In high conflict cases, it's not as simple as one parent saying yes or no. Each scenario comes with unique legal obstacles and requires a tailored approach. So the first scenario is you have no legal right to authorize travel or to take the children without the consent of the guardian. And this is where, say you want to take the kids on a summer trip to visit family or the trip over the Christmas holidays that's coming up. However, uh, the other parent has sole guardianship and control over major decisions, including travel. Now, you have to have that other parent's okay, and they legally, so you don't have the legal right to take the children without that specific permission. So if you can't get agreement from the spouse who has sole guardianship or custody of the children, then you may have to apply to the court for specific travel permission. So the second scenario is you don't have a written agreement or court order. So you might be separated. Oops. My apologies there. You might be separated, but you have you might share decision-making authority, but you've never formalized a travel agreement. So in this case, you're going to need the other parent's permission, but you might also mistakenly believe that you can travel without requiring that permission, and that creates a little bit of ambiguity as to what your legal rights are. Without a formal guideline, written agreement of sorts, this can lead to misunderstandings or simply refusals, and that's where can get very frustrating. Is you think, well, you know, I have the right. Why are you now refusing and refusing to turn over the children because you know that I'm going to go travel, and that can be very frustrating. Um, so the best approach in this scenario is to seek a written agreement with your spouse that clarifies both of your rights and responsibilities around travel. Uh, the third scenario is uh, this is another common scenario where you might have a court order or agreement that allows you to travel with the children with the other parent's consent. But what if that consent is withheld or delayed? What if it's withheld or delayed consistently? The law does provide some remedy here, and one of the remedies might be applying for a blanket consent for recurring travel. It's not but you might also just have to go one at a time, and that's depends upon the individual circumstances. And then finally, imagine parents planning an international trip where passports and travel authorizations are required. If one parent insists on holding the passport to prevent unauthorized travel, it can create additional tension between the parties. And again, this can be resolved through a shared agreement or a court order specifying who gets to keep the passports. I must say here that when you are traveling with the internationally, that quite frequently the border authorities require you to have a written consent document that says, um, or proof that you have the authority to travel with the children. So obviously, if you have sole guardianship or custody, and there's no restrictions on your ability to travel without the other parent's consent, then you can just simply cross the border with that custody or guardianship order. However, if you don't have that, then what you need is a specific travel consent, and that typically is notarized. And that travel consent can either be for a specific travel situation, or it can be for a blanket consent, uh, forever and ever kind of thing. So again, those are specific documents that you would require in the going over the border. And I think it's better to have that kind of document rather than a whole separation agreement. And then you're telling a border authority, we'll go look at page 7 of this agreement. See that, read this paragraph here. It says I can travel with the children. They I think it's much more straightforward to have a simple travel consent. So again, disputes over the getting those documents to the traveling parent at the right time or in sufficient time for travel can also often be a source of conflict. Um, Once you understand what your rights and the specific issues are around travel, we can now look at the different forums that are available for resolving the disputes and getting your travel authorizations in place. All of these options, negotiation, mediation, parenting coordination, and applications to the court are tools to help you reach an agreement. And obviously, if you can't reach an agreement, then the court can impose or provide that authority to travel. So the end goal in each case is to have that travel authorization, so you are able to travel with the children without anybody thinking that you are abducting them. And as I said, there are different tools to get there. So let's talk about some of these agreement documents here. So um, if you are able to communicate directly with your spouse, then or with your ex, then you simply negotiate directly with them, and that's with or without lawyer involvement. And here, as with all of these other dispute resolution forums, preparation is really key. You need to come to the table with a clear outline of how the trip benefits your child and be ready to address any anticipated objections. So now, uh, and again, we're going to talk about that in a moment as to how you get prepared here. So For example, the second issue is uh, the second form is mediation. And again, here you get a neutral third party to help facilitate discussion. And that mediator basically ensures that each parent is heard, and the mediator can help the parents focus their attention on what's in the child's best interests. And again, like any other uh, of the other dispute resolution mechanisms, if you come to the mediation prepared with supporting documentation, um, such as a teacher's letter, if you, for example, if you're going to take the child out of school in order to travel, then getting a letter from a teacher saying that that's going to be fine to take the child out from school for that period of time, that can help in that situation. So um, the third form is parenting coordination, and that's kind of like mediation. You get somebody who's an expert at working with parents on these kinds of issues, and again, their goal is hopefully to get agreement between the parties. In high conflict situations, oftentimes there isn't a it isn't possible to get to an agreement, and so the parenting coordinator is given authority to simply impose a, decision on the parties. Because quite frankly, the courts don't like dealing with these kinds of cases. Um, so if you don't have good grounds for going to court, um, you can expect a fair degree of opposition. Similarly, if you don't have good grounds for refusing travel, the court's going to be very cranky with cranky is a technical legal term, obviously. So, the idea is that if you don't have the good position in this, when you go to court, the court is going to be upset with the situation, and because they don't like having to deal with it. Because ultimately, the court's view is this: that travel is almost always beneficial for the children, unless you're going to take the child to a war zone or take the child to a a country that is not a signatory to the Hague Convention on the Rights of the Child. That's essentially dealing with child abduction issues that they uh, there's international treaties that basically facilitate getting children returned if somebody keeps a child in there, and not all countries are signatories to that treaty. So, for example, I had one client a number of years ago whose ex took their child to Lebanon, which is not a signatory country, and the child was only 10 months old, and then left the child there with his parents in a rural village, or with family members in that rural village, and then returned to Canada and conveniently evaded capture. And they weren't able, the mom wasn't able to get the child back until they the dad was arrested, and then there was some leverage to get the child returned. And even then, it was a difficult process. So, um, if you're planning on taking a child to a non-signatory country, you can be sure that there's going to be concerns about how that's going to work out. And again, that's where you want to say, okay, well, yeah, it's a non-signatory country. However, here's why this is a beneficial trip, and here's what the plan is. And obviously, it's going to be easier to get agreement if there's a high trust situation in place, or high trust between the parents. So um, that's so again, the courts are view travel as in the children's best interest. However, if there's a flight risk, which is, say the United States, for example, is a signatory country, and if there's a real risk that the child is just simply going to disappear, going into that country and then into another country, and then you're going to have trouble finding the child, then that might be a risk. But there has to be real proof of a real risk of that kind of flight risk before the court's going to refuse travel consent. Other components of the travel consent are things like well, what kind of contact should the non-traveling parent have with the parenting with with the parent who's sorry with the children while they're away with the traveling parent? Um, and you would think, well, this should be fairly straightforward. Provide some access to the children, some FaceTime or telephone access. Um, but you can see that that can be a means of interfering with a normal holiday if you're having to check in with the non-traveling parent all the time. And really the 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 key thing here is what's in the children's best interest. The children need that contact with the traveling parent because or the non-traveling parent. Then you need to figure out a way to make sure that that happens. If the children are older, where they don't need that kind of daily contact, then insisting on that contact is not something that the court is going to take is not going to be too happy with. So uh, those are some of the now in Alberta, in terms of a formal court application, what you're going to need to do is go through the normal process is applying for notice to attend family docket court. That is something that needs to be done well in advance. And then um, uh, if you've left it late, then you can apply to the court for permission to bypass the family docket court and go straight into a court application situation. Um, Even that takes time though, and so you've got to make sure that you're leaving yourself enough time before a holiday before so that you can get enough time to get into court. That's why we're doing this presentation now at the beginning of November, because if you're going to get in, if you have to get into court to get an agreement on this, on what you're going to do over the Christmas holidays, the time to start working on that is now. And it's probably even now touch and go as to whether or not you can get it done in that time, just simply because of uh, the the pressures on the court's scheduling. So that's why we're talking about holidays now at the beginning of November. It's not even American Thanksgiving, as they say. But it is the Christmas season. So now, um, uh, let's and again, we've been talking about some of the things here about getting ready for a successful resolution. We've talked about some of these things already, like getting a letters from family members that they'll be visiting. Some kind of confirmation. Say there's a family wedding or something like that. You show the invitation for the wedding. That's that can be helpful. Um, if the children have uh, health concerns, and then you need to think about how those health precautions are going to be considered. So if you're going to take the children camping, oh, then you don't want to go camping in December, but you're going to go camping in the summertime. The children have never been camping, and somebody's got a bee allergy, for example, you need to have some plans for how you're going to deal with getting to the local hospital. So it just demonstrates to the non-traveling parent that you are thinking about what is in the children's best interest and what the children's needs are. Again, like we talked before, getting a letter from the school, if the non-traveling parent can say, well, school is important and you shouldn't be taking the children out of school. That argument is actually not as compelling as you would think, unless it is. I mean, this is, if you're in elementary school and the child's going to miss a week, it's probably not going to be critical for their education. If they're in an advanced or gifted program and they're on a university track, and they're going to be missing important exams, well, then that's probably not a good time to be traveling. Again, you've got to, when you're proposing travel with the children, you've got to be thinking about what's in their best interest. And, again, on the education issue, I simply don't know. And the parents are really the best ones to know what those concerns are. Um, and again, if you can anticipate what the other parents or the non-traveling parents' concerns or worries are going to be about, then you can work on proposing solutions. So, for example, if it's going to be a longer vacation away and they are going to miss school, then figure out if there's access to virtual learning programs. Um, Talk to the teachers and get learning objectives and specific homework that the children can work on while they are away on vacation. All of that demonstrates that you're proactively thinking about what's in the children's best interest, and that's going to help in both in getting an agreement. And if you can't get an agreement, despite all of these preparations, then you're going to be in a much better situation going to court. Uh, Now, one of the issues that can come up is different holiday traditions. See if I can. Um, yeah, this is just a reminder. We'll go over some of this. It stays child-centered, be flexible and open to compromise, and avoid emotional escalation. Again, if you're thinking about what the children's best interests are, and you're prepared with how to meet those objections, it's easier to avoid the emotional escalation. But and I think it also requires some degree of understanding. If what you're planning on doing is going to Mexico with the children, with a new partner, and this is going to be an expensive trip, and your spouse is never gets to go on trips like this, and is feeling jealous of the new partner's involvement in your kids' lives, and especially on a holiday, it can start to get understandably a little emotional on their part, and you're going to get more resistance to the travel planning. So consider getting some advice from, a child psychologist or an expert on how to handle this. There's lots of books available on how to introduce a new partner into the situation. Again, you can't control what the other party's emotional reaction to your planned trip is going to be, but if you can understand what their emotional objection is and take steps to address it in a way that again is child-centered and focus on what's in the best interest of the children. If you still can't get agreement, then you're going to be in a much better situation to go to court and get a court order. Again, you want to avoid that emotional escalation by staying calm and focused on solutions rather than escalating the argument. You're more likely to get a good result in that situation. Um, this is a common theme that I talk about in many of these webinars, strategies for effective communication. I got to tell you that I've often said 90% of my cases are the result of breakdowns in communication between the parties, whether those are business partners or whether they're parents or couples that are breaking up. Um, the the failures in communication are typically what ultimately is underlying all legal disputes or almost all legal disputes. And so it's important to think about what are effective strategies for communicating about issues, especially if you think that there's going to be some emotional um, um, resistance to your plan. And I've got other webinars on this that you can check out on the YouTube channel that go into communication strategies. And I think I've done one with a psychologist as a co-host on that, so you can check that out on our YouTube channel. But here's some simple ones for this. You want to plan a trip? Then start with you always want to keep your email communications simple. It's better to do it by email. Courts don't like having to deal with text messages. There's It's very difficult for a judge to tell what's going on in a text message because quite often there's conversations that are happening in between. There's emails that are happening in between. There's not good date timestamps. So text messaging is not generally a good spot to do this. Probably the best spot to do it is using a program like Our Family Wizard, which is designed to keep a record of all communications between parents regarding their children. And you can deal with scheduling issues and that. So a program like Our Family Wizard can be good. Um, or you can work with email. So whether you're using Our Family Wizard or email, again, what you want to do is keep the communication simple and don't anticipate a problem. Because when you anticipate a problem, then you're automatically going to generate resistance on the other side. As oddly as that sounds, I'm saying well, you should anticipate their objections, but you don't communicate it. So you say something like, um, "Hey, other parent, I'd like to take the children for a trip over the Christmas holidays." Um, and then you say very simply something that they need to know about it. You know, the they're off school from such and such date to such and such date, and normally my parenting schedule will give me the kids on this time. Um, you know, is this a proposal? Do you have any thoughts about this? So that we can work out something that's going to work out for the best interest of the children. Something simple like that. You're inviting a discussion, and you're doing so in a way that it basically shows a little bit of respect for the other party. Even if you don't feel like you have respect for them, it's better to actually show the respect by allowing them an opportunity to contribute to the planning process. Again, you can't control whether they're going to respond, whether they're going to get hostile, whether they get hostile, whatever you try to. Again, if you get some resistance right away, then deal with the resistance. I had one client who was Jewish, and her the father of her kids was Catholic, and the dad's family, the extended family, was always giving the kids tons of Christmas religious-oriented gifts over the Christmas holidays. And so the parents who had agreed that the kids are going to be raised Jewish said, okay, no, no, Christmas time is not going to be a good time for the kids to be around dad because of dad's extended family. So they were able to work that out because they shared a a concern, or they were agreed on the kids being raised Jewish, despite and the dad had converted to Judaism. So that was their choice as parents. But you can see that that's you know in that situation there was a good foundation, but oftentimes there isn't that kind of shared agreement, and so it may take some working out. And quite frankly, there's there is really no right answer on some of these issues. Like, for example, like do you exchange kids on Christmas Day at noon? Um, do you or do the kids have say from Christmas Eve all the way through to say Christmas Day at 5 o'clock with one parent? I've often thought, and this is really just a personal viewpoint, because I know lots of families will do the transition on a Christmas day, but quite frankly, I think that that is um, creating a lot of disruption on that day. And maybe as a family you don't care about it. I personally think that you're better off um, one parent having the entire Christmas break, uh, Christmas Day and Christmas Eve because of those those traditions. But that really is a personal thing for me. I wouldn't impose that on somebody if the parents say, "Oh, no, no, this is fine. We'd rather do it this way." Okay, well, you guys know what's ultimately what's in the best interest of your children. Um, again, so those are some of the issues that we could go on and talk a lot about these issues. Well, there we go. I've got ahead of myself. Threw in some funny little images here. So, I mean, yeah, you can have different holiday traditions, but even within, I mean, my familiarity is more with the Christian holidays than the other holidays. I know that Christmas Eve is really important to some people. Christmas Eve is not important to other people, and Christmas dinner is important. Maybe it's as important as Christmas Eve. Maybe it's more important. Those are different things. Then there's always the present opening on Christmas Day, Christmas morning, and that's a big deal. And so, for a lot of families. So, if you've got conflicts over different holiday traditions, and I threw in a bunch just because I thought it was funny. But anyways, I don't know what all of these ones are. In any event, uh, we talked about that. So key takeaways on this: effective communication, planning, particularly advanced planning, and prioritizing the children's needs are all critical. So, um, questions and answers. Well, you can have questions. I will do my best to answer. And again, try not to get too specific about your situation because um, there might be other people listening to this, and you don't want to hear my answers broadcast to everybody. And I really can't give specific answers, but I'll do my best to be helpful.
So there are no questions in just yet. I expect people need a moment. So I'd like to ask you to tell us more about our family wizard and how it works and why you recommend it.
Oh, okay. I don't know. There is a free version and there's a paid version, I believe. I don't know what the difference is between those. But one of the things that I find is particularly useful is that when the parents have the Our Family Wizard, um, uh, you can actually give your lawyer access to the Our Family Wizard, and it doesn't cost anything for the lawyer. So I can go in and I can see the communications between my client and the other side, and we can print off reports from that, which are nice and clean from a legal court perspective. Um, I'm not sure of this issue, but some of the programs, and I'm not sure whether Our Family Wizard has this, but they have a way of checking your language. So if you're using a lot of profanity and insults to try to bully the other side into agreeing with you, it's not a good strategy. in general, it makes you look bad. The court is going to be take a very poor view of it. And so some of these programs, and unfortunately, I just haven't looked into whether our Family Wizard does or not, will prompt you for that uh, your poor use of language and suggest alternatives. I actually, if you're faced with a situation where the your ex is communicating badly, my view of it is that having those kind of filters is an artificial way of uh, keeping of hiding the underlying problem. We don't really know whether it's fixed. We've just got a computer AI program, so shall we say, that's intervening and fixing it. And I don't know that that's really as beneficial as it is to just figure out how to communicate better and more effectively. Um, so without somebody saying, "Oh, well, you haven't really, you don't really have good communication skills. You're just relying on a computer." So those are my thoughts on Our Family Wizard. The best thing about it is that your lawyer can go in and you can see access to it. It has a calendaring function. It has a way of putting in contact information for medical personnel and dentist appointments and all of that kind of thing. So it's a nice way to keep all of your information and communications about the children all in one place. So
All right, Catherine has dropped some more details about Our Family Wizard into the chat. It says Our Family Wizard offers a variety of paid and free options, including every account comes with 1 gig of free storage for documents and files. Additional storage options are available for a fee. Fee waivers. Our Family Wizard offers fee waivers to parents who can't afford a subscription.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so here's an anonymous question. If a
Okay.
grandparent, if a grandparent has legal guardianship, does this affect the court's willingness to allow the living parent to take the children on trips or travel? Would the courts be less favorable in granting travel permissions to the parent in this case?
Well, I'm going to say that if a grandparent has guardianship, what that says to me is that there's some underlying concerns about the parents' abilities and, or risk factors. I'm not saying that that's always the case because sometimes a grandparent or even a friend can be a guardian for the purposes of having the children attend a school in that parents or that grandparents vicinity. Um, there might be lots of different reasons for a grandparent to have guardianship that doesn't have anything to do with the um, underlying risk factors for the parents. Um, uh, if, but a guardian is a guardian, whether they are a grandparent or not. And so a guardian needs to, um, again, think responsibly before giving consent to travel for anybody to travel. And by the way, we've talked about, traveling, with your own children um, uh, across international boundaries, but quite often the same issues can arise when you're traveling with other people's children. So a school teacher wants to take the children on international trip. I think my wife has taken her kids to Hawaii for biology field trip stuff. And so obviously they need to get travel consents from the legal guardians that may or may not be the parents. So obviously the risk factors in a school trip are much different than giving permission to a parent that has really had struggles in terms of being able to step up to the plate and have full-time guardianship of the children. So the grandparent has a responsibility to think carefully about what the plan is. Now, so I guess that's the best way to answer it. In unusual situations like that, you really do have to be thinking about if you want to travel with your children and you don't have guardianship, but there's a grandparent that has guardianship, then you're going to have to do a bit more homework. You're going to have to take a few more steps to make sure that you've got your ducks in a row, and then it could help, say, if you've got a new partner that has demonstrated responsibility for the children, you've had regular access for the children, the trip is in the children's best interest because they're going to see other family, or it's going to be, particularly good experience. I don't know whether Disneyland counts as a good experience, but I think it probably does, in at least some people's books. But if there's some kind of educational component or historical component, uh, all of those are good reasons to take the children on a trip. If you don't have a good solid plan as to why the trip is in the children's best interest, and you're having trouble staying sober, and your trip is to go to Oktoberfest in southern Ontario, southwest western Ontario, and your plan for the kids is to drop them off at some kind of local daycare facility while you go and drink at Oktoberfest, is probably not going to get approved. Um, I was trying to think of an extreme example, so again, that's how I would approach it. It really is no different. It's just that when you say the grandparents' guardianship, it just raises some questions in my mind as to what's underlying it.
Thank you, Charles. Do border agents actually need notarized agreements or non notarized agreements between parents? Oh, sorry, let me try this again. Do border agents actually need notarized agreements, or are non notarized agreements between parents usually acceptable? Notarization adds costs, and obtaining it can also take time, which in some cases might not be optimal. Would, for example, travel to signing countries usually be okay with a non notarized agreement? I understand that to non signing countries, the border agents would likely have more grounds for asking for a notarized travel authorization.
I don't know about whether the breakdown, whether the divide is between non-signatory and signatory countries. It really depends on the country, and it may very well depend on the border agent. I've had um, I've had people go into the U.S. and never be asked to even show any kind of documentation. They just say, you're traveling with kids, okay, you know, they don't ask for anything. Other times they ask for something, and again, it's a you know, I get it that sometimes it's hard to get the document, but if you travel without it, you may be taking a risk. Now, um, you want to there is, I think, on the Government of Canada website, I think that there is a list of countries that indicates what kind of documentation they require. Because you're on one hand, I don't think all of them require something being notarized, but having it notarized will certainly be a benefit in any case.
All right. At this time, we don't have any more questions. So that's somewhat unusual. We usually have so many questions we can't get to them all before the hour. So, do you have anything you'd like to add, Charles?
Um, one topic I didn't talk about is whether what goes into a travel authorization, and and the kind of information that can be shared or should be shared with the non-traveling parents. So on the first point, typically the authorization should, have the names of the children, their birth dates. Um, it should have contact information for the non-traveling parent, and it should say where what the travel dates are, the periods of time for the travel, and uh, the it can or it doesn't necessarily have to have the itinerary. Um, that's really a component of the second part of it, and that is that if you're going to travel internationally with the parents with your children, the non-traveling parent really should be told the itinerary should be provided with contact information, and they should be provided with like flight information, for example. Nothing, think about it. If you know your children are in Mexico for a holiday and you hear that there's a plane crash involving a flight from Mexico back to Canada, it'd sure be nice to know whether that was a plane that your children were on. So some of that is just kind of basic courtesy about providing the non-traveling spouse with some basic information, unless there's a concern that the non-traveling spouse is going to be some kind of stalker or cause problems during your holiday.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And a reminder to everyone that on November 15th, the Fair Legal YouTube channel is being relaunched. And if you look in the chat, you can click the link to find that YouTube channel and subscribe now. Uh, there has been so much great info-rich content in the many months now that Charles has been volunteering with us here at Canadian Centre for Men and Families, Alberta. So for yourself, for any of your other Alberta friends who want to educate themselves about family law and about co-parenting and separation, please visit that and binge it. We've had a lot of really great webinars. And thank you, as always, Charles, for all of your time and expertise.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing I can say is if you do need some legal assistance with any part of this or any other family matter, you're best to contact the CCMF, and they will arrange uh, a 30-minute consultation at no charge. If you go directly to me, my normal practice is to charge. So. Um, for a consultation. So there's some basic information.
And he is a delight to work with.